Welcome back to the Finger Whack Podcast. I'm your host, Gideon Hurst. I'm joined, as always, by Jake Foote. What's up, Jake? How are you after the holiday?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back. Less good to no longer be undefeated, but always fun to talk.
Yeah, we're gonna dive in and do a little bit of recap of the tournament down there in Orlando, which obviously did not go the way that the Hoyas had hoped. Um, we'll go through all of it and talk about where the team stands now, our general reactions, assessment of the games against Dayton and Miami. And obviously, we've got some big ones coming up here midweek, playing UMBC before the team goes down to Chapel Hill in really their last big chance for a non conference win in one of the toughest places to play in the country. So a lot to talk about with the Hoyas getting into the conference season here.
Yeah, we'll obviously focus much more on what happened the past week. I know we're a little late to the game discussing it, but yeah, you're gonna have a chance this week to kind of erase some unfortunate missteps. The likelihood of that's probably slim, but there's a lot of basketball left to be played.
A lot of basketball. Um, Very quickly, we're not going to do a full game recap and go through the Dayton and Miami games, but just as a reminder to folks, Georgetown drops the first game of the MTE against Dayton, 84-79 in overtime. They really started this game poorly, but made a run at the beginning of the second half. Took the lead actually, then lost it and had to finish the game on a 16-2 run in to end regulation and force OT. And as we will discuss, they actually have the ball with about under 10 seconds left on a little bit of a break, and unfortunately couldn't get a shot off in that possession to try and win it. And ultimately they drop this one to Dayton in overtime. Then we go to the Miami game. Miami's better than I thought they would be. I'm not sure if you had that sense as well. I thought they would be really bad this year, and they do not look really bad. But Georgetown never really in that game. They lose 78-65, drop to 5-2 on the year. Not the tournament that we wanted. Jake, let's start with your big takeaways, and I'd love to if you could give me one positive from the weekend, one positive from the tournament that you see as a big takeaway, and maybe one not so positive. I imagine we'll have more of those as well, but your two biggest ones.
So on the positive side, it's when you go down to a tournament like this, you really have to have one. So it's hard to step away from it and feel excited about anything.
Yeah, totally.
But I do think there are still positives to take, actually, kind of more than a few. The first of which is that starting five group looks like five pretty quality players that
Yeah.
not only play pretty well together, but also all have further eligibility. If you are designing a program to retain players and take a step forward year by year, you're in a decent position to keep the guys that you want going into next year. Those five being Mac, KJ, Isaiah, Caleb, and Julius. And if you add Vince into that mix, obviously Vince isn't a guy that can come back next year, but unless he ends up redshirting this year, which would mean that this season's basically a wash. But those six guys have the best six net ratings on the team. When the 1 through 4, not including a center, play together, they have a plus 28 net rating over
Mm.
153 possessions. They had a bad stretch versus Miami, which was due to the first 8 minutes of that game not being able to throw a rock in the ocean. But they were really good versus Dayton. Um, they were plus 9 together in 24 possessions. The unfortunate thing is Caleb's foul trouble limited how much they played together, which then put Cooley in a position where he was kind of throwing darts at the wall to find the rotation and a group of guys that was working for him, which kind of was a theme of the whole weekend. To elaborate on maybe some positives, I think I was beating the drum before the season. I think Malik is continuing to show that he's a high quality player.
Yeah.
Even on the night that you feel like he didn't dominate, that Miami game, everybody stunned versus Miami, but you walk away and he's 16 points, 7 assists, no turnovers. A lot of other things in that game needed to go differently, but I think he's a guy that, I really didn't have much criticism for him over the 2-game stretch. Maybe you could nitpick how aggressive he was shooting the ball versus Dayton, but he knew the game situation. You're down 10, 15 points. You were struggling on the offensive side of the ball. He had to kind of shoot you back into the game.
Yeah.
And I just think he's been what you needed him to be able to compete to be a tournament team, which what we
Yes.
discussed, 40% from the field, 35 plus from three, assist rate up, getting fouled more, turning it over less. He's doing all the above.
Yeah, this is the overall reactions to the tournament for me are tough because I really look at that Dayton game as the most important game. And the Miami game is tough. Obviously, you want to get one and you have a chance against that Miami team. But, it's hard for me to look beyond the fact that they just looked completely lacking confidence offensively in that Miami game. It just looked kind of to me like you let that Dayton game kind of beat you twice, which happens. I mean, it's not an excuse, but it's a explanation of sorts, and
Yeah.
it's hard for me to dig too much into the Miami game.
It's a hard situation because if you look at it from 1,000 feet like fans do, you're
Yeah,
looking at the Miami game and you're like, all right, we have a quad one opportunity, neutral site. Here's a great chance for a resume booster and to right the wrongs of the previous night in the Dayton game.
yeah,
And if you walked out of there with a Dayton loss and a Miami win, that still looks pretty darn good on a resume.
yeah,
The tough part is when you're in it, for these guys, they played a very emotional Dayton game where they had to come back not once but twice and then
yep,
basically surrendered it a third time. And that's a pretty exhausting experience to then turn around 24 hours later and play again
yep,
against a team that's, probably bigger and more physical than you, which they won't see all that often. Additionally, I think they went into that tournament thinking we're going to beat Dayton and then game two is house money.
yep. I
And
agree.
the, the priority really had to be a hyper focus on Dayton. That game was basically the inflection point of this non-conference. It's tough. It's tough to be too critical because you're one jump shot away, one decision away from potentially winning that game straight up, and then we're not bitching and moaning about any of this stuff. But there were things that got you from tip off to the end of that game that definitely are frustrating in hindsight. Most of which being the defensive execution and the team's just general physicality.
Yeah. I think for me the biggest takeaway from this positive is Julius, and particularly against Dayton. I thought, again, I almost just put the Miami game aside for reasons you said, though I know we can't. But that second half against Dayton was as good as he's looked against as good a competition as he's seen. I do think I had called that Julius would pop against Dayton. I did not think that
Did.
that would come in a loss. So I'll take reluctant credit for that. No, it was nice to see him get going with some of the make a couple of threes. He looked really comfortable. I think you pointed this out on Twitter. His defense on the last shot that Dayton got that then, Kayvon pulls the rebound down and takes it up floor. His defense on Bennett, I think it was really, really good on that play and forced a really tough shot and gave Georgetown the chance to uh, end that game in regulation. I still think he's coming along. I really like what I'm seeing out of him. So for me, I thought that the Dayton game really showed just how good he can be.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think there's a ton of potential there. I'm kind of throwing away the Miami game for him as well because Uday is just a really tough matchup for a kid
Yeah.
like him. Just going to be bigger and more physical, and has a lot of high major games under his belt. But you are right. They needed him to play 35 foul-free minutes against Dayton. They needed him to be a bit of an offensive hub, and he accepted it and was really good in it. All the areas that I was a little skeptical about him in the beginning of the season were on the defensive side of the ball and physicality wise, and he's been pretty good there. I would actually say really good there.
Mm, yeah,
Even this weekend over those 2 games, opponents only shot 42% at the rim, which we're 7 games in now. The sample size is no longer that small. He's consistently defending the rim with a lot of resistance.
yeah,
That game defensively, both those games were lost basically on the quality of shots that the guards of the opposing team were creating on the perimeter.
yeah,
We'll talk about it, but both teams were extremely efficient from the outside, far less efficient as they got closer to the basket, which is, tip of the cap to Julius that he's doing his job. Additionally, I really, especially if you're going to accept that with this stretch without Vince, that this is the way you're going to play, that Julius is going to be out there for a lot of the time, you got to start playing through him more
yeah. I agree.
offensively.
I agree.
They have, so I'm referencing Hoop Explorer right now, but their frequency of touches, I won't go into it, but they compartmentalize all the types or in ways you score, and they give every team a percentile of how many points per possession you're scoring in those methods. And
Hmm.
they're the 95th percentile or better in the country in big cut and roll,
Yep.
big post up, and high low, which tells me that they're not a good team shooting from beyond the arc. Their two guards are able to create a bit off the dribble, but to some varying efficiency levels. They're probably the most efficient version of them offensively when Julius is involved
Yep.
because he can pass out of the short posts, he can pass out of the high post. He's showing an ability to score down low pretty comfortably. So yeah, I agree with you. Really encouraged with him. It's crazy to think of him just as a freshman. That there's a lot of growth still to be had, and I think you have a good player on your hand in time. It's just you're asking him to do a ton right now.
Yeah. I totally agree with you on playing through Julius Moore. And to me, it's kind of it ties into, for me, what lost you that Dayton game. And I watched this back, and you really are, the first 8 minutes of that Dayton game were not very good. They just weren't sharp on either end. But after that, they did play, I think, really well, and they are a couple of bounces that just didn't go their way. And not to say that they didn't have agency to take that game, but you're a couple of bounces, a couple of shots. There's two very, very in OT. KJ and Julius both miss like bunnies at the rim that just kind of rim out, and they're just unfortunate that the bounces didn't go your way. You're right there. But to me, the the thing that lost them that game was spacing on offense. When their offense got stagnant, they were not spaced properly, and that it, the defensive execution, particularly the zone that gave up a couple of big corner threes that just killed them. And to
Yeah.
me, those are the big sort of negative takeaways. What's your not
So
so positive?
if we're just gonna isolate the Dayton game, I think there's a lot of reasons you lost.
Yeah.
First of which, that Dayton team was coming into that game not a good offensive entity. I know they hit 15 threes against BYU, but
Yeah.
prior to our game, they were shooting 29% from three. The two times they played high major opponents, that was Marquette and Cincinnati. They scored less than zero point 0.9 points per possession. It was kind of like a Maryland type offense that you had
Right.
faced, and you really had a chance, I think, to assert your type of will on the game and make it very difficult for their perimeter players. And what I was hoping, kick their ass from the jump.
Yeah.
I think obviously the game wasn't totally lost because you had your chances at future points in the game, but this is a team that's built to play from ahead
Yep.
rather than chasing 3 point 3 points of possession while trailing. And we did that in Maryland and we did that versus Clemson. We allowed ourselves to get in a pretty quick deficit against Dayton. And then it requires so much energy to get back into the game, which leads me to my second point. They came back to tie it or take a lead essentially twice, and each time surrendered a 10-0 run, both
Yep.
times. What I was most discouraged about in the game was that you like I said, you expend all this energy to get back. Once you get back to even, the game has to be thought of as a new game, and then from that point forward, it has to be played on your terms. You at that point you play at your pace, you play your style, and you say we're better than you. And I don't know if it was they just lost concentration or if Grant just kicked Cooley's butt because I think he did a little bit. But that game was played on Dayton's terms from start to finish, including the overtime. And it always felt like we were just trying to stop the bleeding. And I was just discouraged in that aspect because I think you play them 10 times, you beat them 7,
Yeah, I think you're right.
and you just didn't have a full 40 minutes there.
No. I So I totally agree with you. I think you do, 7 out of 10 times, even if that game goes exactly, the same plays as it did, I think 7 out of 10 times Georgetown ends up winning that game. To me, and I saw the same thing that you did. They expend all this energy and really, I mean, particularly the run at the beginning of the second half, they just looked dominant for that first 4 minutes. Just ran straight through them. As soon as they get up one, they take their foot off the gas, and part of it to me is they went zone throughout the second half and gave up a couple of big shots and possessions in the zone. And to your point, like I struggle with that, and I know you want to switch up defenses. This team is so good in man to man. I would like to see them fall back into that man to man defense a little bit more, particularly when you've put so much pressure on them to go up one. It's tough for me to see them score on one end, come back in a zone that is allowing Dayton to sort of set their offense and run just an overload to the left side and get an easy corner three out of it.
Yeah, I agree. They were definitely mixing defenses, and in theory, zone's a good idea against Dayton. On the scout, it's going to be that these guys can't really shoot it. The kid that killed you was Bryce Hurd, who coming into
Yeah,
the game was 2 for 28 in his career from
right.
three, and then he hit, or maybe it was like 5 for 40, but he hit 7 threes over the weekend, including the BYU game.
Yeah,
What bugged me a little bit was more so how they played the zone.
yeah,
The way they played the zone against Clemson, it was obviously a focus on not allowing the ball to get to the nail. They didn't want Godfrey or Welling to be able to face up our 5-man and go from there. And I think they did similar things in this game where they prevented the ball from getting to the middle. The problem is, I think against that Dayton team, it needed to be maybe more extended to the point that the flat three on the bottom could stay more at home. Because you're right, that's where they got killed in the corner. Dayton shot 5 for 6 from that left corner.
yeah,
And so maybe that's where I disagree in how they played the zone is just the responsibilities that each individual had, where I think they just basically should have played their area, pushed them off the 3-point line, and dared Dayton to basically play inside out against them.
yeah,
But there were mental mistakes too. When they went up 44-43, I would have said, game over, go step
right.
on the neck. And they made a mistake in the zone, gives up the three. And then we were such a streaky team the whole weekend that when the offense worked, the defense worked. And
Right.
the minute one thing stopped working, it got carried over the other side of the floor. And the offense went to hell over that next stretch.
Yeah.
The one that kills me, and this wasn't a zone play, but the KJ gamble in overtime.
Just crushing,
And
crushing.
KJ was, bad KJ still, I think, comfortably our best player. But you're up 3, you have them on the ropes. Again, you can play these last 3 minutes totally on your terms,
Yeah.
make it a half court game, you know, basically make it Mac versus Bennett, who's going to be the better decision maker in the half court. And KJ gambles on that pass, doesn't get it, and then it's total breakdown. Bennett gets a wide open 3, and now it's a level playing field again. And
Yep.
I think at that point, Dayton was having such a hard time scoring against you. They scored 2 points in the last 4.5 minutes of regulation. They didn't score their first possession in overtime. You threw them a life jacket there. There's no good way to analyze it. It's just there were so many little plays in that game that were so frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, that play stood out to me as well on rewatch, and I think you're right to point it out because it's indicative of the plays that they're just margin plays that you like the aggressiveness. It's part of who they are. You can't miss there.
Yeah.
That's the key. You just can't, if you're gonna go, you can't miss there, and he did, and that I think I totally agree. I think it switched the entire rest of that OT, and
And
you know,
it's game situation. Again, I don't want to be telling KJ to turn off his aggressiveness
yeah,
ever, because his aggressiveness is going to basically create the things that you're trying to do, get points at the line, create these live ball turnovers that you can score from. But it's game situation. It's, there's 6 possessions left in this game both
yeah,
ways. We cannot under
can't give
any
him,
we can't allow a freebie.
yeah,
Every shot has to be contested. Every shot has to be well earned. And it's just frustrating that you gave up that good of a look when basically the rest of the game you didn't get a look nearly that good.
yeah, and you know, we don't need to belabor it, but it looked to me like KJ just saw a glimpse of ending that game on a pick six, and he takes it, and
Yeah, and
I
you almost got back and blocked the shot.
yeah, I mean an inch more, and he makes that play, and the entire the entire weekend is different. So it's tough, and you don't want to undercut the aggressiveness, but yeah, that play absolutely killed him
Yeah, a lot of little plays, but they get magnified in the last 4 minutes.
for sure. Let's key in a little bit on the backcourt. We'll come back to the rest of the bigs. We talked about Julius. I want to talk about Fort and some of the other big options. But since we're on KJ and Mac and the backcourt, I want to get your assessment. I think you're right that Mac has looked really, really good. I think my only nitpick with him in the Dayton game where there were a couple of these plays that, just his shot selection in key moments, not generally. I think generally he took pretty good shots, but there's one or two that he took that were really not the shot you needed. And then he compounds it on the other end. There was one, I think early in the second half, he takes a really quick pull up three in transition, then gets beat back down the court and gives up an and one, and it's just like those compounding mistakes that you can't have. But overall, I thought he was great. Any thoughts on the backcourt as a whole, and really who else in they need a third guard, obviously. And
That's the issue.
who's it gonna be?
So if we were, gonna run down the laundry list of negative takeaways from the weekend, first of which is that probably physicality and focus on the defensive end. Second of which is the depth. And we may have kind of overestimated how prepared some of these guys were, and how much depth we actually had. Now, for the 2 starters, I don't have a lot of notes. KJ, I think that was a bad version of KJ over these 2 games. Maybe not as aggressive and energetic and as focused as you needed him to be, but especially because he's the guy that drives the bus in all those facets. His energy basically is the battery for the rest of the team. But I'm nitpicking there. He played
Yeah,
69 minutes. When he was on the floor, they were an even. He played, I think, 16 minutes, or he sat for 16 minutes. And in those 16 minutes, they were a negative 21. He
yeah,
sits down to get their ass kicked. So, and that's true for Mac too. And I have, like I said, not a lot of notes for those two because they can't survive without him. Now, where we get worried is when we have to go to the bench options, of which I'd say you can classify 4: Jeremiah, DHS, Langston Love, and Kayvon. And, DHS is probably more of a forward
yeah,
with this group, that he's going to play as a backup to Isaiah and Caleb. But one of them has to be the first 1 through 4 off the bench, and then we can just move parts around him. And I don't think anyone's really grabbed that with authority, and it's hurting them because Kayvon played the 9 most important minutes of the season in the last 9 minutes of the Dayton game, And that was the first time in his career that he's ever been put in a situation like that. And it wasn't like they were riding the hot hand on him either. He had missed every shot he had taken in the game. He had had some kind of bonehead plays in the first half when they started to trail. It felt like Cooley was just kind of throwing darts and, maybe hoping that Kayvon did a few things, grab that role by the scruff of its neck. But
Yeah.
yeah, we sang the praises of Jeremiah in DHS in Canada and in exhibitions, and they kind of just they haven't been doing the same things as connective tissue, and it's rearing its head.
I want I think all of that is right, and the Kayvon thing is interesting to me because I think you're right that he was just putting Kayvon in that position to say, "Hey, here's a shot. Go be a menace on defense and help us just do everything on that end." And he was actually pretty good defensively through those minutes. It's just that one play that, I don't that's not the play that, lost them the game, but you do just want to shake him and say, just give the ball to KJ there, man. Just give it up to KJ in transition. But I think the real issue with that group right now to me is what in the world has happened to Jeremiah Williams.
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of run down the list right now and say, here's the issue with each of them. With Jeremiah, it's that, he scored 12 a game in a Power 5 conference 2 years ago, and now he can't throw the ball in the ocean. And
He took two of the worst free throws
oh my
I
God.
think I've ever seen. And like he could shoot, and like I know he could shoot. I mean, not a great shooter, but he could shoot free throws. I genuinely don't know what that was.
And the other thing that's bugging me about him is that when he comes in, he's seeming to run the point.
Yeah,
And I would have said prior to the season that a good thing about him might have been that, that we know there's evidence that he can run the point, takes some of the load off Malik and allow Malik to play off ball. And that may even help us offensively. And that hasn't been the case because Jeremiah, not only has he not scored, but he's really not creating anything either. So he's a net nothing out there on offense. And you'd like him to be this real physical perimeter stopper on defense, but I haven't felt that either.
yeah,
And if he's not elite defensively or basically adequate offensively, then he's not going to help you,
yeah.
which has unfortunately been the truth when the games have actually mattered. On Kayvon, I can tell that they're really trying to like infuse confidence into the kid and thus, his freedom shooting the basketball and the 9 minutes they gave him down the stretch of that game. But I think he's the kid that needs that confidence, but he's also the type of player that they just need to simplify things for.
Totally.
I think when he's out there, he thinks he needs to do more than he does.
Yep,
He'd be a good defensive first player because he gets a lot of deflections. He's able to guard his on the perimeter,
yep.
but he's fourth in the Big East in 3 points attempted per 40 minutes.
That's insane.
The three guys he's behind are Stefan Vax, Bryce Lindsey, and Solo Ball, who are the three best shooters in the league.
Yeah,
And Kayvon shoots 11%.
yeah,
So he's the worst shooter in the league.
yeah,
Cooley has said complimentary things about his shooting, but at some point you got to put it into practice. There has to be some sort of evidence that he can make these shots in game and not only make them, but take them at the right juncture. I think
yeah,
he's maybe misinterpreted his role that he's in there to be a bit of a gunner so that if he touches it, he shoots it when that's not necessarily the best option. I think there were two instances in that Dayton game and they weren't perimeter shots, but he basically got the ball kind of in open space both times and ran 1-on-3 with
yeah,
nothing. And a guy of his ilk, who's essentially the fifth guy out there, probably has to realize, all right, nothing's there. We're going to bring this ball out. We're going to give it to Malik. We're going to give it to KJ. We're going to run our offense. Or in the final instance, which is just unfortunate that it didn't happen, he had KJ right next to him, center of the court, one of the best transition players in the country. And if you hand that off and let KJ run a 2-on-1 or 3-on-1 with Letang, a guy who can't move his feet laterally, being the one guy back, you win that game.
yep.
Which again, it's hard to say you lost because of one moment, but Kayvon, I know he's just a freshman. I know he doesn't have a lot of experience. I know he's never played at the end of a game, but you have to know better that you're like, hey, I score 2 points a game and I shoot 20% from the field. This guy scores 17 a game and he's the man. It's
Yeah.
his ball. And
Yep.
another thing, Cooley should have called timeout. The minute Kayvon didn't make the pass, took
Yep.
like 2 extra dribbles and crossed half court, Cooley had to know that Kayvon saw red
Yep.
and he should have taken the ball out of his hand by just calling timeout.
Totally agree. Yeah, I'm with you. I see what Kayvon's trying to do. He's trying to be aggressive. It's a slight misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what that means. And it's tough I think it's a really tough thing for coaches to walk the line of trying to instill needed confidence in a guy. And then you have to be careful of going to him and saying, hey, we want you to be confident. And I think I would like him to be a spot up shooter. I think that's fine. It's the off the dribble shots. It's the sidestep threes that he takes. It's it's the taking the ball but it's tough for a coach to balance giving this kid confidence and then coming to him and saying, but oh, by the way, we don't want you to handle the ball at all.
It's it's tough because if he shot 33% from three, which isn't even a great mark, you'd be like, oh, this is a pretty novel player. A
Yeah.
guy that defends and can put it in the hoop every once in a while, especially playing with your second unit. And this team does need an infusion off the bench, scoring the basketball a little bit. That'd be great. I think the problem is he's not an 11% 3-point shooter. He's not that bad of a shooter. The
Yeah.
percentages are that low because the
His
shot
shots
selection
are,
is just not correct.
yes, 100%. And this is why I say I think he could be a 33% 3-point
So do I.
shooter.
So do
He
I. If
just
everything was in the rhythm, mostly open, you find trail threes in transition, you find
Yep.
kickouts off offensive rebounds. You find these 3-point shots in the offense without them having to run anything for you. You can shoot pretty well from three. Isaiah is no knockdown shooter. He's shooting like 32% from three without a play called for him. You got to just kind of pick your moments so that it's a quality shot.
Yeah.
Vaughn's not very picky.
No. I would, and I'm glad you bring up Isaiah, because my number one note for him, we're just sort of jumping around the map here, but I would take like a good chunk of Vaughn's shots, not all of them, but a good chunk, and give them to Isaiah. I want Isaiah to shoot when he's open more than he does. And it's not a lot. I don't want him shooting a ton, but I continue to be really impressed by him. Uh, I think it's a sneaky sort of really, really smart coaching and development move from this staff that to bring him in and to identify him as a starter and contributor on this team. You gave the stats on the four starters with a center. I think he's been really good on both ends, and I would like to see him get a little bit more, just slightly more aggressive offensively, because I have confidence that he's going to take good shots and shots in the offense. And he is very much not looking to, he's looking to definitely not shoot at all right now. And I'm perfectly happy for him to let it fly if he's open.
I wouldn't mind him putting it on the deck more too.
Yeah.
He catches some of these balls on the perimeter, elbow extended. He's made a couple mid-range shots, especially in the bye games.
Yep.
And yeah, I agree that I wouldn't mind him being a little more aggressive just because you need to find some of these alternative scorers.
Yeah.
But yeah, he reminds me of Caleb last year,
Yeah.
where he can be your fifth guy out there. It's very rare you feel like he hurt you on a given day. Maybe the percentages aren't great, but you still kind of have this confidence that he can probably be a decent shooter, especially in time.
Yeah.
And that as that offensive game develops, again, he's probably a year, potentially 2 years away. But yeah, he's bigger than Caleb. He's probably a better athlete than Caleb. Like you could really envision him turn into just a really solid Big East player.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think what's come of him in the last few weeks has been a promising development. He was a minus 20 in 10 minutes in the Miami game, and they went away from him in the second half to basically audition everybody else. But I I'm not worried about that at all.
Yeah.
The negative stats there were just because they were so horrible offensively as a team. They
Yep.
started 1 for 16. But yeah, I think you got a little something there. Now
And
you just
he
need a bit more down the roster.
Yeah, and I do wanna shout him out for stepping up and making 2
Yeah,
massive free throws at the end of regulation, down
huge.
2 to
Yeah,
tie the game up.
that will be forgot about because they lost that game. That was nails.
Yeah, that really was. Let's do a little bit more on the bigs. Obviously, we're settling into our post Vince world, our little Vince hiatus that we have here. Good to see Vince in and around the team. The team put out some, Instagram content of Vince taking photos. He looked in good spirits on the bench. All reports are that he's doing well. That's good to see. So glad to see Vince around the team, and hopefully he's coming back soon. We talked about Julius. What were your thoughts on Jaden Fort this weekend, particularly in the Dayton game? He got a lot of opportunity, and also when Georgetown went small without Julius on the floor.
It's necessary that he's got to be that guy right now because Seal, they don't trust Seal, and Seal played a few minutes in the Miami game, and it was ugly. So all eyes on Fort.
Yep.
I didn't think he was awful. I think
Yep.
he kind of held his own. He's going to be a total zero offensively, I think, which is fine. I just think that they can't, when he's out there, they can't surround him with like two or three more guys that are zeros on offense, or else the offense is going to get bad really quick.
Yeah.
Like I think in that Dayton game in the first half, he was out there with Jeremiah, Kayvon, and him, and it's just like, oh, like that's three guys that aren't going to create anything in the half court.
Yep.
Um, but he held his own. He protects the rim pretty well because he's just got good shot blocking instincts, like we've discussed before. He's not great as a post up defender. That's where I get nervous when somebody throws it into him and he's just on his back. It looks like he almost loses his base when he gets backed into, and it doesn't really let him jump, which is what he wants to do defensively. And guys have kind of worked their way around his hip to get easy baskets. He's he's got a ton of talent, not in terms of putting the ball on the deck and putting the ball on the floor, but just in terms of like what a physical freak like him with some pretty good defensive instincts could be long term. Both of us have been pretty excited about what it might look like as an upperclassman, but it's going to look like a baby deer right now, and you just kind of gotta survive his minutes, or at least surround him with personnel that's going to just minimize his role as much as possible.
Yeah. And to me, when he's in the game, even potentially with Julius, I don't ever want to see them in zone. I want them in man to man and basically just switching everything to make it really simple for him because he is so good defensively, so good in recovery. I just want to see him. I want to see him put in a position to show out defensively. And I agree. I think the book against him for me would be to just post him up every time. Maybe he gets better at it. I think he's got a lot of talent defensively and a lot of athleticism. I thought he looked pretty good. I think it's just a comfort thing, and more minutes are going to make him more comfortable over time.
Yeah, it's still it's still just a negative compared to what you'd be getting from Vince.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's not
So
even in the ballpark.
it really brings both the floor and the ceiling of your center rotation down. When I think with Julius and Vince both right, it could be a really good 40 minutes there, which is
Yep.
funny to say because 2 months ago we talked about how that was the glaring weak link on the roster.
Yep.
And I'm not so sure about that anymore when they're healthy, of
Yep.
course. And secondly, we discussed this earlier in the year with Julius and Vince that there are going to be some games that might cater towards Julius more. Dayton feels like one with a European center that wants to stretch it out a little bit, that isn't an athletic freak and isn't that physically strong. Miami is the opposite of that. A
Yep.
game that you really needed a guy like
You need
Vince
it,
just
Vince.
to kind of throw a physical body down there with Renault and with Uday. And it was pretty obvious from the jump that it was men versus boys. And I was pretty high on Miami in the preseason. I think if you circled back to our pod, I said, a chance at potentially two different top 25 teams. And I don't know if Miami's top 25 good, but I really liked Renault. I think Mike Woodson was awful, and I think he's a good player, and he's obviously proving the case. That's just any team that has a really big four guy that can score at multiple levels kind of feels like our worst defensive matchup. And they took advantage of it. But that's I just really wish you had Vince in a game like that.
Yep. Tough without Vince. I do want to just touch on Caleb here. I think the biggest thing that we have seen so far this year is Caleb has to stay on the floor. And I don't want to do the ref thing, but I want to call out the fifth foul call on Caleb in the Dayton game is one of the worst calls I think I have ever seen. That is horrible. Durkak is jumping into Caleb as he goes by. I mean, literally jumping into him and flops. And so I don't even know. There's no world in which that's a foul. And Fran Fraschilla on the broadcast, who just, God love him, he is terrible. Fran Fraschilla is like, I don't know. I can see why it's called, but I don't think it should be. That was awful.
I do think that was really bad, but I'm going to sound like a grouch here. I lost a little bit of sympathy for Caleb's foul troubles when he committed 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Were just
Yeah,
really dumb.
totally.
And part of the reason you went down in that game the way you did was because Caleb wasn't on the floor. And the second one was when he was at the top of the key and he just basically stiff arms a guy, totally unnecessary. The third one, underrated, one of the more stupid / dumb plays of the game. There's 20 seconds before halftime. They're in the
Yep.
double bonus. It's their possession arrow on a jump ball,
And
and he's reaching in for a rebound 90 feet from the hoop that not only gives him his third foul, but stops the clock and gives Letang 2 free throws, which he made both. And had you even gotten your jump ball there, the ball would have been back to Dayton. You would have started. You would have started with the ball in the second half. Big whoop. That one really bugged me.
Yep, you're totally right.
And so when you make 2 plays like that, and I know Caleb's one of our smarter guys, and you just kind of let him. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes, but when he does make mistakes, you let him play through them because you totally need him out there. And he's a sophomore, so I guess he gets some leash. He needs to be smarter than that. And I'm judging him on a tough curve there, but he needs to be smarter than that.
100%. You're absolutely right. It was just an awful decision. I still think, as bad as that decision was, the foul call on him on the fifth foul, I watched it maybe 50 times because it is genuinely one of the worst offensive foul calls I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I agree. It was bad. Caleb might have been, kind of a little out to lunch and not seeing what was in front of him, but Durkak was moving underneath them.
He's not, there's no, yes, totally. Caleb's running to his spot. He doesn't need to contact Durkak there. You'd like to see him just kind of avoid that. He doesn't. Durkak flops, but Durkak's not in any sort of legal guarding position. He's not straight up. He is literally mid jump into Caleb.
Yeah. My bigger gripe might even just be with that the refs blew the whistle at all.
Yeah.
It's kind of like feel of the game was you've got this comeback coming. It was a transition moment away from the ball.
It's nothing.
Those type of calls disrupt the flow of the game. And I'm just a general hater of referees interjecting themselves in close games.
Agreed.
So that's, definitely annoying. And you definitely needed them in overtime. That's the annoying part. But I was so frustrated at that point. I was just like, what?
I mean, we don't need to go too deep into Caleb. It's just so clear that this team needs him on the floor. He needs to be out there.
Yeah. And no notes on Caleb. Caleb's a good player.
Yeah.
He's starting to learn how to put the ball in the hoop too, which is something this team needs.
Yeah. Stay on the floor, Caleb. We love you.
Unfortunately, I got another stat here. And I used to touch upon this on Twitter if you followed me at all last year, but the team was good last year when Mac, Epps, Sorber, and Peavy were all on the floor. Unfortunately, that got disrupted quite a bit with the Mac missing a few. Epps missing a bunch, and then Sorber missing the final stretch of the season. But when those four guys played together, it was for sure a tournament team. It feels similar right now with KJ, Malik, and Caleb, that
Yep.
if those three are on the floor together, you're just fine.
Yep.
Regardless of who your center is, regardless of who your fifth guy is out there. And the stats prove it. They've played 250 possessions together, the three of them. And the teams played to a plus 23 net rating, which would be top 40 in the country. Unfortunately, when one of them comes out, this is any of them, it kind of falls apart. They've played 240 possessions, so basically half the season, with one of them on the bench for any which reason. In those 240 minutes, they're a -7 net rating, which would put you bottom of the barrel, Big East.
Yep.
And it feels true that things unravel when any of them are off the floor, which is not great because I don't think you can ask all three of these guys to play 36 minutes a game, especially when you went into the season basically celebrating the fact that you had a bunch of depth and that you were prepared for moments that were going to be different than last year. And it just feels like margins are real thin again.
Yep.
Not to be a Debbie Downer. Like, that can be corrected. There's plenty of time, but that's how it's played out thus far.
Yep. Those are that great to see eye test matching the stats. Not great to see that that's the situation you're in, but Jeremiah Williams is not this bad. I know that. I've seen him play much better than this. There's something's up. I don't know. Just not a good couple of days for him. He was great earlier in the season, even though he wasn't scoring. I'm pretty confident that he will bounce back. And I think you've got to just simplify the game for some of these guys. Um, we didn't talk a lot about DHS, but I think there's opportunity still there for him. You want to keep it simple for him. I think he's going to have a game here at some point. They are. Go
No,
ahead.
continue.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say DHS is the one I want to claim the role
Yeah, I'm with you.
because I just think that he's the most versatile on defense. He can kind of slide in 2 through 4 comfortably. I think at this point you're saying that fifth guy is just a wash offensively, and it's just going to be a guy like, who of those four can play the most mistake-free basketball that elevates the floor of the unit defensively. That's
Yeah.
what I'd be looking for.
Yep. And to me, I think there's things that the coaching staff can do to help these guys, particularly on offense. One of the things for me is playing through Julius a little bit more and the spacing. One of the best sets of the weekend that I noted in that Dayton game, they ran like a little. You've got Julius and Isaiah in the two corners. And it's funny. The play ends in Julius's corner 3 there, and you can see him actually warming up his shot before the play starts. Like, he's shooting it like a free throw. But you run kind of a horns set with Fort and KJ at the elbows. KJ gets the ball. Fort dives. KJ just a really simple sort of curl dribble and forcing the defender to help off of Julius, and he gets a wide open 3, knocks it down. The spacing there was easy and really good, and I noted a couple of times when they were simplifying and giving KJ space to operate, space to drive. Mac has driving lanes. They get cutters coming off of those guys. That's when they look their best offensively. And I think you just got to keep the floor as balanced and as spaced out as possible, even though you don't have the shooters to really, really space the floor. I think you just got to keep the driving lanes as open as possible and let Julius and KJ and Mac create with cutters coming off of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Julius still only made the 2 threes, but I think you do have to kind of explore how to use him as a spacer. You do have to maximize the situations in which Caleb is catching the ball, moving downhill,
Yeah.
not having to kind of break people down from a standstill. I don't think that's really his game. If you are going to introduce, let's say, DHS or Isaiah into the offense more, I don't think it's a bad idea to utilize them more in a traditional forward role, use them as ball screeners, pick and pop options. They got to get creative because it's just not great on that end unless they're getting fouled a lot. And part of the reason they were getting fouled a lot towards the beginning of the season was Vince was getting fouled so much. So, I don't have a solution, but the staff's got to find something amongst his personnel. That being said, I don't think the offense has been really the issue outside of the 1 for 16 start against Miami. I think it's kind of been what you expected. And if you did play defense how you expected versus Dayton, you'd be 6-1 right now and saying we're fine.
Let's do a little bit of a season outlook reset here. We can sort of close up the tournament and look at where they sit. So we were Georgetown 5-2, 88th in Ken Palm. The net came out this week, and we'll talk about the disaster of the net for the Big East. But they sit at 122 in the net rankings. 8-3 in non-con at this point is the most likely. 9-2 still possible, but you've got to go beat North Carolina in one of the toughest places to win in the country. What do you've got UMBC this week and then North Carolina. Where are you on where this team is overall? What do you want to see from them over the next week? And then we'll do a little bit on the Big East after that.
I'm not in panic mode at all yet. Definitely a little discouraged. Definitely feel like you wasted an opportunity
Yeah.
that you may be kicking yourself for later. And when we discussed earlier in the preseason podcast, when we both said 8-3 is probably the most likely. We felt we had a good feeling this team could pull off 9-2. It always felt like that pathway to 9 kind of had to include Dayton.
Yep.
That might have been the easiest draw you had of the 5 non-bye games. So without that one, it does feel tricky to get to 9-2, but you never know with UNC. I don't think they're that great, and maybe you luck out that Hubie is probably not the best coach, and you get him on an who knows? But still not in panic mode. I still kind of maintain the judgment that 21 wins is going to get you in, no matter what the net numbers say,
Yeah.
and that comes 13-7 in conference. That's a very fine line to play with, but it has to start with your 2 wins in these 2 games without Vince, most likely at Marquette and home versus Xavier to start the Big East. Unfortunately, as the net ratings line right now, those are both quad 3 games. I think that's going to correct itself in time
Yeah.
as these lesser teams play a mid-major schedule and the major teams continuously play quad 1 and quad 2 games, that everybody's net just naturally rises. But I think there is a world in which a lot of these Big East games at home end up just quad 3 games, kind of regardless of who you play. And that if you lose at home, it's going to suffer quite a bit for your tournament resume, which probably isn't the most favorable to us because it's pretty well documented. We probably have the worst home court advantage in the Big East.
Yep.
So again, you made things a lot harder for yourself if you're serious about the tournament by losing the Dayton game. But I don't think it's in panic mode. And I think it's very emotional to basically judge the state of or the health of a program after losing the second night of a back-to-back against a quad 1 team in their home state without your best center. Like,
Yeah.
let's not go crazy.
Yeah.
Team just has to regroup and get better as the season goes on, which has been a staple of Cooley's Providence teams. None of them were ever non-conference giants.
Yeah. Yeah. This next week, you want to see them put together a really strong next week. They're going to be 8.5, maybe double digit dogs to UNC. And, I'm not saying go down there and get a win because, again, that's really tough, even with a potentially gettable UNC team. But go put a good performance in. The Big East as a whole is in rough shape as we've mentioned. They've got 4 teams in the top 50 of net. I saw Jeff Goodman trying to cut that off at 45. Don't know why you would do that. Top 4 in the 50 of net, which includes Butler and Seton Hall. Shout out to those 2. Not sure how long they're going to be up there, but good for them. You got one sort of bubblish team in Villanova at the 64 spot. And then everybody else in the Big East is 100 or worse, including Creighton, Marquette, Providence, obviously Georgetown. Marquette being a quad 3 game is just brutal. You mentioned that this is probably going to normalize a little bit over the course of the season, but I think I just emphasize the point you made that the margin for error in Big East is going to be extremely slim. You cannot drop home games because, as we've talked about, you can't have bad losses on your resume, and a home loss against a quad 3 team is a bad loss, even if it's Marquette.
Yeah, it's the key with net as people, start learning about it. Don't look at your own rating.
Yeah.
That, if we were 75 or 122, there's really no difference. The committee's going to look at your resume, and the net of the teams that you play is what's important, because that's going to determine what quadrant those games qualify under. And at the end of the day, you want more quad 1 wins, more quad 2 wins, no quad 3 losses, especially no quad 4 losses. Now, the unfortunate thing for Georgetown right now is you could have said going into the season, a road at Maryland is likely a quad 1 game. All Maryland had to do is be top 70 in the country. Home versus Clemson's kind of a coin flip if Clemson's top 30 in the country. And then neutral Dayton, neutral Miami. You need to be top 50 in the country for quad 1. Potentially 4 quad 1 games if everything went perfectly there. Maryland's 200th in the country right now. So you kick their butt and you're feeling, almighty. Now it says if you had lost to them, like, season over. Clemson is teetering on quad 1, quad 2. I think they touched 30 today, so it becomes a quad 1, but it's worthless to look at until the end of the season. But Dayton's going to be one that you kind of have to keep an eye on, because Dayton's at 88. If Dayton drops below 100, that becomes quad 3.
Yep.
And that becomes a bad loss. So again, it's so early in the process. These numbers are going to normalize. At the end of the day, how many games you win and lose is going to be way more important than what KenPom or Net says you are. A lot of those numbers are decided by your points per possession over an enormous data sample, when some of these games are decided by one possession, like the Dayton was. And you just have to win on those fine margins. It's unfortunate that you lost opportunity number 1 versus Dayton, but Cooley's had a pretty good track record with it. You got to not be victim of carnage in the Big East, because I think a lot of teams are just going to 3 through 11 are going to beat the hell out of each other. And I kind of agree with my sentiment going into the season that it's probably like a 30% chance you make the tournament and things have to go right. Vince getting hurt is not aligned with that.
Yeah.
But they're not dead yet. They got to beat Marquette, got to beat Xavier. And even this week, I wouldn't write them off. They'd better be desperate. They better play desperate this week, because you got your ass kicked. It's time to put up.
Yep, I agree. I think you play like, go in and try and make UNC play your style. You
Yeah,
take
you
it
got to
to them, and you let the chips fall from there.
you got to say this is going to be the Kentucky game. Part 2, if half our team fouls out, we don't give a shit. We're going to beat you up. And if you match us physically and execute, you beat us. God bless. But if you don't match their physicality after not matching Dayton's physicality and not matching Miami's physicality, I'm going to be a little annoyed.
Let's end this on a high note, and go a different direction. We have old friend Micah Peavy hanging out in New Orleans. New Orleans is having a tough go of it, but Micah Peavy is not. Jake, you wanted to talk about the NBA player that Micah Peavy is.
Yeah, Micah Peavy's an NBA basketball player. New Orleans sucks, but I don't think there's a doubt that Micah belongs. I also don't really think there's a doubt that Micah is going to stick around for quite a bit of time.
Yep.
Which is obviously what we're all rooting for. Zion went down today too, so his minutes are going to go up even more. And, as a fan of Micah, I have no interest in whether New Orleans is winning games or not. I just want him to get these 25, 30-minute runouts and play as much winning basketball as you can in that environment.
Yep.
You'll survive if you do. Now, Micah is actually, in reality, carving out a pretty big role. He's played 30 minutes in 2 straight games. Over the last 8 games, they've given him a pretty extended run out. He's scoring almost 10 a game. He's shooting 47% from the field. And that's with not making threes at all. He had a stretch where he missed 14 threes in a row, but he corrected it the other day, made 3 of them against the Lakers. And in reality, he's a consistent 3-point shot away from being like a surefire pro
Yep.
for a long time, for like a decade.
Yep.
Maybe this is reactionary, but the Pelicans are 11 points per 100 better with him out there. I think he's pretty much already established himself as their best defender, sans Herb Jones,
Yep.
which hasn't been out there most of the time this season. And who knows if the people running the show in New Orleans get the chance to stick around. I know they've already fired their coach, but they seem like they really like him and that they're giving him, not only him, but all the rookies down there, a serious shot to play their way into a healthy NBA career.
You love to see it. And
And
yeah,
we said it in the draft coverage that it was that Micah can do this. It's just all about the situation that he gets drafted into, whether that situation was going to give him a chance. And again, the Pelican situation isn't a winning one, which I think would actually be perfect for Micah, but it's one that allows him to get his feet wet and play into some confidence, into maturity. And he's doing so. He's fourth amongst all second round picks in minutes played. So
wow.
pretty good. Right behind Kalkbrenner, Sion James, both with Charlotte, and Will Richard is getting some run for Golden State.
So you're saying all rookie Micah Peavy is in play?
Uh, he's got to start putting the ball in the hoop. He's averaging 5 points a game, but and he's the third best rookie on his team. But
Still.
it's going as well as I could have hoped. And I think I started this whole podcast journey as Micah Peavy's biggest stan.
Yeah. Great to see. We are continuing to root for Micah Peavy. Tough situation down there in New Orleans, but great to see him. I saw he went with the fro yesterday as well, which I always love. Love to see him pull
I
that
don't
out
know.
every up once in a while.
Reminds me of TCU game. I
Yeah.
don't know about
Well,
that.
there's that. All right. I think any last thoughts, Jake, before we get out of here?
No, just we got a long season. We still have a fine basketball team. We're going to play a lot of stressful games. Ed Cooley, get used to it. We still have a group that I think is really easy to root for.
Yeah.
And yeah, just it's obviously this tournament. This is basically the best way to explain it. This tournament went as bad as it could have. You go down there. This was the worst way it could have gone.
Yep.
You lose to Dayton in heartbreaking fashion. You get your ass kicked in a consolation game, and you fly back with nothing. But it's not the end of the world. And this team hadn't lost since August. They had won these exhibitions comfortably. There are things to be learned from losing. There's probably way more to be learned from losing than from winning. Now it's all about just how they grow as the season progresses and how they get better.
Yep. And I would just emphasize there's a lot to like in this team. I would encourage people as they're watching this game to these games is to live and die with the ups and downs, but find something that you genuinely like. For me, it's Isaiah Abraham, it's Juice hitting threes, it's Caleb Williams staying on the floor. Find something that you really like about this team, regardless of how it's going, and focus on that if you start to get frustrated, because it's going to be a slog, and this is a tough basketball team that I'm very confident they are better than what they showed in these last 2 games, particularly against Miami, and they've got a chance this week to go kick the Tar Heels in the mouth.
Yeah, let's go shock the world. Kind of need.
Yeah. All right, Jake. We'll be back to hopefully break down a win at UNC. As always, Hoya Saxa.
Horace Gideon. Take care.